With that, we will move on to our inspirational interview. It is with Maria Josenhans. She's an avid outdoor painter whose studio work plays back and forth between representational and abstract as she allows each painting to find its own unique path. Welcome, Maria. How you doing?
Good. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Just give me a second while I spotlight you. I'm going to scroll through some of your images, some of your recent paintings off your website. And if you could, please take the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm here today in my studio in North Vancouver. I also have a studio in my home in Burnaby. And as you probably know, I paint mostly in oils. Sometimes I paint in gouache as well. And I do both work from life outdoors and then I also do studio work for my larger painting. There's a big one behind me. Some of these that you're seeing right now are a mix of both the plein air and the studio pieces. So
we timed it perfectly.
Oh, good.
So just for an easy question right off the bat, when did you become a full-time artist, and can you talk about what you did to get to that point?
So I went to university for illustration, actually. So right out of high school, I did that. So I think I've always considered myself an artist, which is something that, although maybe I wasn't full-time, I guess it depends on what the definition is of a full-time artist. Like if it means that I'm making my living from it and that sort of thing. If we're going with that one, it's probably been about 15 years or 10, 15 years or so that I've been doing that. And I'd say that what got me to that point is really just loving what I do and loving trying to make beautiful things, right? Try to make that are meaningful, right? Not just decorative. My illustration background was really useful. I worked for just a couple of years though as an illustrator, and it just was not my deal. And so so I actually photographed I used to paint when I was an illustrator, and then I left that, and I was always interested in photography. I'd always done that even through high school. And so I worked with like large format, black and white, darkroom kind of work. And I did that for, I don't know, 20 years or so. And after I no longer had a darkroom, that's when I returned to painting again. So it was actually a very natural sort of shift because I was photographing nature and landscape. The natural shift was to like, okay, well, how do I do this in paint? I kind of departed from the actual question.
No worries at all.
I would say that, probably to get to that point meant that I just continuously worked visually. That's the most important thing. I think sometimes people don't always value themselves as an artist if they have a day job. And I really want to express my opinion on that, which is you're still an artist. Right? Don't let yourself be put off by the fact that maybe you've got a day job. Because if that's what it takes for you to like make the art that you want to make, that's the way you should do it. That's how you should get to it.
Yeah, I have to agree with that 100%. And besides, everyone else also makes you feel not like an artist because you have a day job, which is unfortunate, right?
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
So this photography thing, this is interesting to me because I just learned about this kind of before our interview. And for 20 years, that must have really, and that explains why you have such a keen eye when you go out and paint, because you've really honed it during your photography years, correct?
Very much so, yeah. And actually, I had a mentor who I still feel is my mentor, even though I don't see him hardly ever now. I always say he taught me how to see because he is such an amazing photographer that, also working large format, black and white. So when I say large format, for those that don't know, that means like my film size, my negative was 4 inches by 5 inches. So that's the size I was working for the most part. You can work as big as 11, 14, even bigger in your actual negative size. So it becomes, you're very attuned to, well, this is where coming in, like understanding like values and all that kind of stuff in black and white is definitely important, right?
Yeah.
Because, what works small in a black and white photograph, you can't just blow that photograph up and match those grays and it works. You might have to shift something and so you start to learn just even sort of more, I'll say technical sides of the aesthetic from there. So, but yeah, just all those years of looking. So even though I'd been painting first and then I moved to photography for all those years, when I went into painting, all I had to really do was just like get used to the paint again and figure out the medium and see how it felt again, right? Because I was able to apply all those other years of looking to what I was going to do now with paint.
Yeah, nice. That explains a lot for me anyway, without a doubt. Explains a lot. And so I guess let's talk about the abstract quality of your work. And I call it an awkward simplicity because whenever I look at your work, I look at it and I go, how can it look so good? But because it's so simple in a good way, right? But once you look closer, you can tell there's a lot going on in each piece, and it's quite complex. Can you talk about what goes on in planning your plein air or your larger studio pieces?
So I would say the idea of less is more is basically, an adage that I really feel I go back to all the time. I think maybe people that have taken some of my classes and stuff, they might have heard me say this before, but do you remember that show called Name That Tune?
Yes.
Where so they're like, I can name that tune in like 2 notes, right? So you got a little clue, then you get to hear 2 notes, and then you got to tell what the whole thing is. And that's the same idea to me as making a painting, right? How few notes, how few marks now will it take to describe that object or that feeling, right? To me, mark making is so important. I'd say that less is more is probably where I would go with that. I mean, there's so many other, there's just so many great painters out there these days, right? And there's this one guy, he lives in Maine, the state of Maine in the US. And yeah, that's like, you can tell I've heard him say it, less is more, less is more. And you look at his paintings, you're like, oh yeah, yep, he's definitely living by it too. And it looks amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of his mantra, and it seems like it's your mantra as well, right?
And it keeps the energy too. His paintings have like a lot of energy, and that's also bringing in that idea of like the mark making as well. What's in the mark?
But this brings me to Notans, and when I was introduced by Notans by a workshop that I took many years ago, it was introduced to me as basically a value study in 4 different grays. And I did it for the exercises, and it never really stuck, and I never really got it. And so I never really did my sketches in the field. And when I did, I maybe did it in 30 seconds, and I didn't really plan it anymore.
Right.
And then we've gone painting, and you pull out your Sharpie and a white piece of paper, and it's black and white. And I go, oh, that's interesting. And I didn't really get it until I interviewed Skip. So if anybody watching this interview, go to community.artfulminds.ca and watch Skip Whitcomb's interview that I had with him. And he discusses that it's all about abstract shapes. And as soon as he said that, I go, that's exactly what she has to be doing with her Sharpie, and no more values. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, completely.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you're making this map of all those shapes, right? Like, so it's like the big shapes, the little shapes, the more detailed line maybe of the shape. It's kind of like remember those probably at like, your grandmother's house, you saw those on the wall, there'd be a profile that was just a black cutout, right?
Yeah.
But yet it was a portrait. So you can think about like that black shape. It was all just a shape. Like there were no eyes or ears or anything, right?
No, that's right, yeah.
Just from that one line and understanding that line and that shape, we got all this information out of it. So definitely there's an abstract quality. You begin to also simplify. So once again, like less is more, like I'm outside. Right. There's so much stuff going on. I mean, actually, last time you and I were out together, right, there was all these logs. There's like a million things going on. Okay, well, what am I focusing on? Which directions are important? So it's constant editing, right? What are the big shapes? How do I want to design this? Right? How abstract do I want to get with it? And that's when you can just kind of let it go too, right? Like you get your basic design, and then you can decide as it's going along, which way is this going? Is this going to, am I going to keep going on this, or am I going to kind of like just let it sort of sit in these big shapes? Because that's the really interesting part of it. Yeah.
Okay. So when you do your first black and white with your Sharpie, and you come across a nice abstract design, you let it evolve though when you're painting.
Yeah. Okay. I will. So then you can figure out, like, within those shapes, how much is happening in those shapes. You can also even think like, all right, what's more important, my shadows or my highlights? Because if I put a whole bunch of information into both equally, into the shadows and the highlights, now once again, I've started to even things out. So now I want to know, like, okay, is this painting more about like all that stuff that's going on in the shadows, and the highlights are just like blown out? Because if I look at it, I can't look at both of those things at the same time.
No, true.
And so I can't really expect, or maybe I don't want my viewer to really, if I want them to go down a path that, if I'm trying to lead them down a certain path, I can't begin to add in all these other things that really don't have anything to do with the path, right? So I get to decide, is it going to be more about all the stuff that's happening in the shadows or in the highlights? So within those shapes, you can decide, oh yeah, this is going to be like my big shape, this is all my shadow stuff, and this is where all the action's happening, right? And the other stuff's just kind of like the supporting player that makes my eye go around, or maybe something like that, right?
That's right, yeah. So you try to do unequal proportions of each.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of leads me into your drawings. Like, a lot of people know you for your paintings, but I don't know how many people know you for your black and white drawings in your, I don't know if it's an oil stick or if it's
Oil
an
pastel.
or oil pastel itself.
Yep.
I'm going to bring it up on the screen in a second for everybody to see, but do your drawings influence your paintings? As for me, they kind of represent a skeleton of your abstract design, kind of like your Sharpie studies needed in your paintings, or is it more of a symbiotic relationship?
I'd definitely go with the latter. Because to me, they started from a place of actually just exploring mark making and line. And certainly, they're going to have like a Notan sort of feel to them. And of course, that will play a part in whether they work or not. But I really do, like when I'm doing them, I really feel like I'm painting just with a different material, because it's so much about like that, that quality of line, the pressure, the difference between like a light pressure and a heavy pressure, and it's all just that same fat oil pastel that you can't, is hard to control. And my favorite part about it is when you put a mark down on that white paper, there is no such thing as an eraser.
No, that's it. The
So
total value is there, right?
yeah. So I kind of feel like, I love that. Okay. I have to think about those marks. Yeah, that you really have to think about the marks that you're putting down, because there's no taking them back once they're down there.
Do you find it helps you develop stronger composition just working in those two values?
I don't know if I even really think about it that way, because I think I just think of it really like so much more that it's just the mark making, and there's a far more like emotional component to it than say using Sharpie,
So
right?
it's more
like
expressive, I guess.
Yeah, because depending on the paper that you use, and then like how much tooth it has, or is it really smooth, and like it's gonna go on differently. So I mean, it's kind of like choosing any substrate, right? Like how that's gonna affect like how thick is your paint. If you've got really thick paint and you put it on and you drag it across a really rough canvas, it's gonna appear different than if you've got smooth and really, really smooth, thinned out paint kind of thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think, you mentioned you had Skip on here, and it's like, he's such an amazing painter. When you see the way that he lays paint on, it'll blow your mind. Because there's so much paint. I mean, he loads his brush. I don't know if you got it. I'll have to go back and watch it now. But I mean, he really loads his brush and really lays it on and plays with those edges and all that. So it, becomes very sculptural. It's just like a different medium to me. So it's just as rich and full as a painting, just a very different medium.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And for those people who haven't seen these drawings up close, they're not small either. They're not 8 by 10 or 11 by 14. They're like 24 by 36. They're almost like full sheet, double sheet, right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, actually, a lot of them are on like I can buy like one ply kind of mat board, and you can get them up to like 40, 60. And that's why I say I feel like it's so much painting, because it's a very physical product. Like I find painting, especially, that's why I like painting big, because it's a very physical process. And doing the drawings big too is very, very physical in that way.
Oh, no doubt. Not just reaching across and moving across, but stepping back, looking, analyzing, and coming back, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And when you want to get those larger dark shapes, right, you really have to like go at it. Yeah, I love it.
Cool.
Great.
I'm gonna have to be a fly on the wall one time you're in there.
Okay, sure.
Absolutely.
This is my wall right back here that it's got a 40/60 sheet on it. It's a backing board to do the drawings on, so that
nice.
Pick up texture. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no doubt, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about your palette that you use when you paint. Now, I don't know if you have a set palette. Yeah, I don't think you do. You have colors that you love and colors you always have with you. But from what I've seen going up painting with you, what you do, you're unlike anybody else I've painted with. You go out and you see your scene, you do your Notan, and then after that you say, well, what colors I'm going to use? And you said it once, and I said, what the hell do you mean what colors you're going to use? Don't you have your set palette? And you start pulling out these obscure colors. You pick 3 or 4, and it always seems to be in some sort of triad or something like that, and you just paint your plein air stuff with these 3 or 4 colors that you have, and the results, of course, are always very harmonious, and they always seem to work well because you understand values, and you're not really surprised by the obscurity of some of the pigments you choose. I guess my question is, why and how do you do this? And does that translate into your studio pieces? Or do you go with more colors?
So the reason that I used to go out with it. Okay, two reasons to paint outside. The first one being I'm going out to like get information, accurate information that I want for doing studio work. The other one is for just going out and making painting, right? So I'd say the set palette of cad yellow and a cad red and a alizarin permanent and an ultramarine blue and I love Viridian and white, right? Like that'll get you just about anything you want. Yep. So that's like a great set palette. But sometimes I would say that most important thing is that I get out of my own way. I'm always in the way of myself. I just need to leave so that Maria can paint. The best way for me to do that is to throw something at me that I wouldn't choose, right? Sort of remove the responsibility. And by doing that, I also remove the idea that I must make a painting that looks like that.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right? So now, like, I mean, if I have a palette that has no blue on it, right, and I'm painting an ocean scene, something's going to happen. And it may not be good, but it'll surprise me. And that is the most important thing.
Yeah,
for me.
And you're never worried about the colors. The most important thing to you are your values and temperatures, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it really, really makes you think about color, temperature, and value. Yeah. Right? So if you've got three colors and it happens that for instance, like the blue that you have on there is actually very light because maybe there's some white mixed in it or something, right? Suddenly, ultramarine is probably my most used color. I love ultramarine. It just does. It just does everything, it seems like, right?
Yep.
So, but if I suddenly don't have my ultramarine anymore, it's pretty awesome because now I have to really make some different decisions. And honestly, like I love the surprises that happen. I don't know if you can see it. So the painting behind me is actually just done with three colors. They're weird colors.
Of course they are.
Of course they are. What's kind of cool is that giant, you can't tell how big it is, but it's quite a big painting. It's like 54 wide by, I don't know, 36 or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Much larger than I thought.
Yeah, much bigger than anything. So, but it's actually based on a plein air experience that was this evening scene reflecting in the water that was blue as you can believe, and then really dark. I came back to the studio and I just decided, like, I'm going to try this scene, different format and in different color. Like I'm removing the blue. Like I have no blue. And I loved what it did, right? Like it was just, the three colors are
manganese. Leave me hanging. No, go ahead.
Right. Manganese violet, which I hadn't used in 6 years or something. I had to get the wrench to open the tube, right? And then these two colors that I just adore by Old Holland called Indian Yellow Brown Lake Extra and Old Holland Green Umber. A friend lent me a tube of that, and I was just like, oh my God, where can I order this? It was just like, oh, it was just such a beautiful color. And I'm very fickle like that. I go through like, oh, I love this color now. Anyhow, it was amazing what those three colors did, right? Just three. So I went from there with that. So when I'm outside, yeah, I'll just kind of see what I got with me, see how the day is going.
Yeah.
Some days are good, some days are bad. We know how that goes. Especially when things are really going bad. I just the best thing that I can do to get myself to leave is to not have any of my comfort things available to me. And suddenly...
It just seems so counterintuitive. You're having a crappy day and you're making it worse.
The first time I tried this, it was my birthday. And I went out, of course I went out painting on my birthday.
Absolutely.
It's my birthday, I'm going out painting. So I went out and I stuck my hand in a bag and pulled colors out.
Oh God.
And it was hysterical. And I fell in love with the process. I was just like, oh yeah, this is gold. So that's
awesome.
What I do.
That explains a lot for me, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, and with that, we've actually hit 30 minutes. So if you have a question.
Oh, I did see real quick that someone asked in chat who that person was that I was talking about in Maine, and that's Eric Jacobson.
Oh, okay, yeah, he's on Instagram, right?
Yeah. Super nice guy. Super nice guy.
Do you ever have imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome? I don't
Yeah.
think I've heard that. What does that mean?
Oh, it just means you don't think you are as good as you are, and you feel like you're a fraud.
Oh,
Yes.
oh,
I
hmm.
obviously not. I bet everyone here has had imposter syndrome at some point in time.
I think there's just, if I were feeling that way, that's kind of like what I was talking about though, with me getting out of my way, getting out of the
Yeah.
way of myself, right? Because what's in the way is me judging my work, right?
Yeah.
And just like the judge is just like hanging out like hardcore, right?
Absolutely.
And part of that judging can be so much about, well, what are other people going to think? Right. And so, like, I just need all those people to leave because I know that it's one of those things. The more you paint, the more you understand, okay, what's my experience? Well, my experience is when I do something fast and I do it with unexpected things that that I'm happier with my results. And generally, my one of my favorite phrases is, what comes from the heart goes to the heart. So that's me painting from the heart. And even if I think like, oh man, people aren't ready for this one, this is gonna be, they're gonna just think this is like weird or something, right? Generally speaking, if I think it's like pretty killer because it all just flowed out,
Yep.
so people are going to respond to that.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. Like when I'm teaching, I think that that's like the most important thing for people to hang on to is that idea that whoever they are is the painter they should be.
Yeah. The confidence that
Right?
goes with that
Yeah.
too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anne is asking if you could just repeat what you use for the big black and white works. What kind of, is it a special kind of oil pastel or any kind works?
Yeah, well, I like this one called, yeah, you could use virtually anyone, but one second.
Yeah. She has her particular love, I'm sure.
Yeah, I found these ones that were not very expensive. Actually, I would say locally, the Holbein oil pastels are good. What do they look like? They look like that. So those are good. You don't have to get like their square like artist ones. But what you want to avoid, depending on that, so oil pastel you can put on regular paper because it's a wax base and it won't degrade the paper. But if you use those oil sticks,
Oh, yeah. Good point.
like a pigment stick, that's basically just oil paint in a stick form. And you need to use like oil paper for that because it'll kind of bleed into the paper and yeah.
Yeah. And over time, it'll rot it and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
But we'll let the conservatives worry about that, right?
Right. Yeah.
I just want to touch on you paint with Shirley a lot, and we've painted quite a bit, and you always seem to have a little gaggle of people around you when you paint. How important do you think it is that you have other artists that you admire and really want to paint with around you at times?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I do. Yeah. And to be able to reach out to them when you're feeling you're not sure, especially when you're not sure what you're doing, kind of thing, to talk about it and not to. I think one of the important things is to learn what you want first off from your friends and like what you want. Do I need to hear, oh, that's so good? Or do I really want to hear how it makes them feel, right? I'm going to get more from, like Michael, when you come over and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that really feels like the day or so, so maybe it's not like, some, museum painting or whatever, right? But I'm getting a sense like, oh, okay, well, at least, I'm leaning towards that. And then I can, so I think learning what you want and how to like actually try and talk to your friends about art, and not necessarily as like a critique or anything like that, but just to like share ideas, right? Yeah, I just think it's super important. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree 100%. When I started painting with Denise and then you and Shirley, I think my whole world changed because I just wasn't relying on my skill set. I could stop, walk around, and honestly, I'll steal things from you guys because it's just an amazing idea. And I think that growth is probably more important than any workshop I've ever taken, honestly. So biggest tip I think I can give everybody out there is paint with people that are better than you.
Well, that's why I really value, teachers like Skip. He will tell you absolutely, he has no secrets, right? Like if you ask him a question, he's not going to get a little bit cagey or something like, oh, they're going to try and paint like me or anything, because he knows how hard it is, right? I mean, because that's the thing. So like, That's why, like, I love when you say, like, oh, I steal a little something from you over here, and say, because I know that it's not really stealing, right? Like that you
No,
couldn't
not at
steal
all.
if
But
you tried, right? Like,
yeah,
and no one really can. So, and that's why I think the more we sort of like are open and just like let go all that stuff, the more everyone's going to really start to paint like themselves,
yeah,
right? Like how they're meant to paint. And I've talked about this a bunch before, where it's just like, I really feel like it's important that, you make friends with yourself, right? You've got to judge who's really who are they really judging, right? Are they really judging you, or are they judging what you think you should be, right?
mm,
So that's why the judge needs to leave, because they aren't
yeah.
really accurate. And besides, I can't be anybody else. I'm just,
Oh no, why
like,
should you, right?
right,
Yeah,
exactly. And that's why, like, having fun with exploring mark making and stuff, marks are so personal. Like, no one's going to make the same mark. It's like, it's a signature,
yeah,
right? Like, no one's going to exactly sign my name the same way,
yeah. But
right?
and it takes a while to find yourself in those marks, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. Yep. And by doing mark making, it brings a stronger emotional component to our paintings,
Yeah,
be them, even if they're a realistic kind of painting, it still is bringing, that's your mark on it,
yeah.
right? Like that's how you described it. That's what you saw. Everyone's going to look at the same object and see a million different
Oh,
things, right?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Michelle, I'll get to your question in a bit, but Sandra posted a question that made me laugh. Sorry, like it's nothing personal, but it says, "Do you have a standard ABC process when you're approaching a plein air piece?" I think probably not, right?
No, I'd say I kind of do.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, I always do some kind of sketch, whether or not you can make heads or tails of it. It doesn't really, like, that's not the point of the sketch, right?
Okay,
Because,
yeah,
but I would say the ABC for sure is going to be sketch and do several different sketches. Just get some of the ideas out, right? Like,
yeah,
or what do I see? And better yet, like, if I'm not even sure what I want to do, the best thing to do is just start sketching,
yeah,
right? And then I mean, I think we all do that, right? Like you figure it out, like as you get going, you just got to start moving, right? So yeah, I'd say like sketching is first, and then you and I earlier talked to Michael about, like, block in, and or I should say, those big abstract kind of shapes, and that's kind of how I block in a painting, right? And then C would be like, how far do I want to take it?
yeah.
Yeah, because
And then,
sometimes, as we all know, we're outside, the light changes so much, right?
yeah, absolutely.
So you're like, oh, well, it's changed so much, and what I was doing isn't really there anymore. Do I want to just leave it where it is right now? Or do I want to continue it and just turn it into something else, right?
Yeah, make
Like
that
just,
decision as you're painting, right? I
yep.
guess that, and that is kind of risky too, because you're not just
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not following the light, but you're changing your direction.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I generally don't change direction. I'm more like, that's why I like working small, because I'm generally going to be like, okay, that's it.
yeah. Okay.
Moving on to the next idea.
So you've
That
never taken
idea.
a 24 by 36 out plein air painting in over 3 days?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
I
interesting.
I keep
Okay.
saying I'm going to. I keep saying I'm going to, but I haven't.
Yeah,
I do want to.
yeah.
Yeah, check with me next time.
Okay, okay. Will do. Michelle asks if you could just give a little insight on your painting process. I see underpaintings using a dark wash, perhaps, or yeah, you don't really do that whole underpainting thing. You just go straight in it, usually, don't you?
Um, Outdoors, I could just go right into it.
Yeah,
Like there's definitely, I'll block in, but I never cover like the whole canvas. I don't pre-tone canvases to go outside. In the studio, it's a free for all. I do what I will call underpaintings that may have little to do with what the final product's going to be.
interesting. So it's not a full tonal underpainting then.
No,
No.
definitely. I used to, like, years and years
Yeah, I
ago.
think we all have, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's great to, I mean, it is a great way to start, in the sense that, I mean, it's like that writer's thing where, the blank sheet of paper, right? We got our
Yeah.
blank canvas and we're like, oh yeah, where's this gonna go? So yeah, that helps to, like, get you going, right? But now I approach it various ways. We don't really have a whole lot of time to talk about all that, but
No worries, no worries.
but I would say, what I would say is, I allow that part to be the very intuitive part. I do a lot of planning for my studio work. I do a lot of sketches, value studies, maybe other small paint, small studies. So I'll begin like, that painting with that in mind. But then to start the painting, it will start in a completely different way, knowing that that's where I'm going to go with it, with the other painting stuff. But it's kind of that energy mark making thing that I've been talking about that I want in there. So that's kind of like the start of it.
Yeah, just getting to know it on a larger scale kind of thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's actually a really great way to put it, Michael. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I am articulate sometimes. This kind of brings me to, how do you take your plein air pieces or even a small studio study and take it to the larger 18 by 36 sizes?
Yeah, in various ways. So I think it depends on that plein air piece and what it is about it that I love. So if it were a piece that I were outside and I was doing the A of plein air painting, which is to like gather information, then I can just use what's there in terms of like color and that sort of thing. But I might play around a lot with like maybe the composition and that sort of thing before I do a bigger piece. Or maybe I did a piece outside that was like a little bit, we'll say a little bit more creative, right? A little bit, taking a little more artistic license with what was going on in front of me. And that energy is what I want to like, that's what's making me want to make a bigger painting about, right? So I think, yeah, it's going to depend where, what I want my end product to be, kind of thing. And then and being willing to let that go as the process goes.
Besides your photography mentor that really helped you see, do you think there's any other artist or any other creative, doesn't have to be an artist, I guess, that has inspired you to where you are today?
Yeah. So we were talking about the drawings. There's a woman named Pat Steer, Steir. She's an older woman now. She does like very abstract work. And I actually did a couple of workshops with her. And it all happened for me in like 30 seconds, which was, I saw her hold a pencil and make a line. And I swear to God, I know that sounds like all whatever, but it was totally true. She loved her pencil. And she took the pencil and said, "Oh, this is just so beautiful," and took the pencil and just made this line down. And I was like, that's it. That's why her work is hanging at the Metropolitan, because she understands that quality and how to achieve it from like her person outward kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I've always loved the abstract expressionists ever since I like de Kooning and Franz Klein. And I always gravitate towards those things, like at the modern and stuff, like when I'm going to the museum. But at the same time, I've always loved the impressionists for sure. I don't know. I love it all, honestly. That's it, and I think that that's important, I guess. Something that I kind of value is like being able to go in and look at something that's like completely the polar opposite of what you do, but being able to like look at it and understand it and admire it. Right.
Yeah. And you almost took it a step further, because I love all that stuff, but I've never taken a workshop with it. So it seems like the hockey player that takes ballet lessons, a representational artist, they should take a leap of faith and maybe take a few workshops in abstract to really hone that skill of abstract shapes and just variety, it seems, right?
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that.
And hers wasn't even really like that kind of workshop, because so she was good friends with Saul LeWitt, who is a conceptual artist.
Okay.
And so we did like just a bunch of like conceptual things, but it was just that time where she just like, I saw her take the pencil and like do this. And I was like, so also Agnes Martin was one of her teachers, who was a very minimalist. I don't know if you know Agnes Martin's work.
No, I'm gonna have to look her up.
So stuff like that. And yeah, just really beginning to like, it also makes you value the marks that you make, or like reconsider what you do.
Yeah.
Which is like the important part of like, making friends with yourself. Like if you're going to paint the pictures, you better like what you do.
Yeah. And it makes you more conscious of the actual painting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Are your studio pieces informed mostly by previous plein air, a photograph taken at the scene, memory and emotion following intuition, or a combination of all?
No, that is a good question. No, and definitely the last part. It's a combination of all. For sure, I would say that one of those things that you just listed are going to be the catalyst, right? But certainly for a bigger piece. So maybe it was just a plein air piece. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do this big. And there's a lot of times when I'm actually like on site and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do a big painting of this. I mean, I definitely have plein airs that I did knowing I'm just going to bring this back and make a studio painting. And sometimes they're very similar to the smaller piece.
Yeah.
With few changes, just because I knew that I kind of knew exactly what I wanted to do. But
So studio pieces from plein air pieces are kind of far in between?
No,
Okay.
I'd say all of everything I paint outside somehow makes its way in some little bit into a bigger painting.
Gotcha.
Right. So maybe it's not that exact one.
Yep.
But now, like, I mean, there's certain places, I think we all go back. I mean, Michael, you go to like Pitt Meadows and stuff.
Yes.
So it's like, if you're going to make like a bigger painting from that area, everything you've ever painted there is somehow playing a role in what you're doing, even if it's not that single one that you're looking at. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons too. I keep most of my plein airs because I'm like, I need them. They're my seeds.
Yeah.
You know, if I get rid of my seeds, how am I going to grow trees? So
yeah. So how many plein air studies do you?
Oh
wipe?
God!
Well, how many do you wipe away that you don't like, or do you keep them all?
Oh, I paint over them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I
love
the
the paint
time
over.
before you decide you want to keep it.
The paint over I find very interesting. So if you want to learn about yourself and how you see, make another painting that you think has nothing to do with the painting that's on there on top of it. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to find that there's all these little sweet spots that it's like, oh, I didn't think that would play a role, but look, that is landing right where that kind of landed on that other painting.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, it's really, it is. It's pretty cool, actually. I really love it.
Do you find yourself visiting the same locations regularly, or do you like to vary where you go to paint outside?
Both. And although, Michael, we were talking about how, you and I and some other people will go out and paint together. I also love painting by myself, right? Like,
absolutely.
And I know you do a lot of that too, Michael, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's like this lovely sense of doing both, but a lot of times, I love going back to the same places. And then other times, that's one place where I will say, I just follow my mood. Do I feel like painting back at a place where I was, or do I want to go someplace new? And sometimes I want to go someplace new because last time I was at that other place, I made a successful painting, right? Like I'm going to go back there and I'm going to keep that other painting is going to keep popping up. And I want to make something new. I'm not interested in making the same painting again.
Yeah, because you always seem to be drawn to the same spot in that location that you visited before and had that successful painting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I fall in that trap all the time.
And it's kind of like the first bite of ice cream is always the tastiest.
That's true. You never get that fix again.
And then you eat the gallon trying to like make it taste like the first bite. And that's kind of like chasing after trying to get that good painting again. It's like, well, I was already there. I already did that idea. So then it's my job, and I do consider it my job, right? To go there and like make a new idea.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's just not another painting of that scene. Well, it could be that scene, but it's a whole different idea in that scene, right?
Yeah. I think that's where, if you ever get to go to the Picasso Museum in France, in Paris,
yep,
there's a million of them, I know. But the Paris one, like that's where I really understood the genius of Picasso, because he could take that single idea, fish on a plate, right? Like in his pottery and stuff. And every single one of them is absolutely different and absolutely perfect and tells an absolutely different story.
Interesting.
And it was just, how can one person, right? Because, and it's so funny because we're all kind of like schooled and told how, oh, you want to get your style and blah, blah, blah. No, if he were thinking that way with like, oh, they need to all look like they're from me, he never would have come up with all these things. And it was his hand that did it. So they all look like he did it, right? Yeah.
Interesting. Came in, and what advice would you give to someone who wishes to progress an idea from a small piece, say plein air or a small studio study, to a significantly larger piece, besides larger brushes and lots of paint?
Those are good ones. Definitely doing sketches where you are simplifying, because the bigger your painting, really the more simple it needs to be. So bringing it down to as few values and as few shapes as you can, so that when you make it larger, it will still hold together. To me, that's where, shapes come in. So important, right? And understanding value. And so one of the things we think about is, okay, well, now I've got this giant space because I've made this giant shape. Well, then we don't want to break up that shape. And that's where understanding value, meaning where color falls on the grayscale kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a million different colors, and as long as they're all the same value, that shape is going to hold together.
Yeah.
So that's really like the main premise of making larger paintings. I know we're talking representational here for the most part. So that's what I'm speaking to, is that idea of like, a landscape perhaps, right?
Yeah.
But those large shapes holding together because you really understand value, and it all stays in there. When you had Skip on, did he talk about George Bellows?
No, he did not.
Oh, okay. He's a huge George Bellows fan. And George Bellows is an American painter from around the time of Homer. All these guys, like just masters, absolute masters of their color and their value, and understanding the significance of simplification of shape.
Yep.
And simplification of value. So yeah, I don't want a million values in my painting. I want to key it one way or the other kind of thing.
Yeah, that's right. And when you say key it one way or another, you also want one more dominant than the other. Would you say so?
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
So it's keeping that, otherwise we've just equaled everything out again. In order for dynamic generally means where something's dominant, right? And it's going to be about that idea, and everything supports that idea.
That's right. And there's always a sense of variety within it. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you mentioned, large shapes of the same value of color. Is that how you think about it? Do you think of it as the same color and the same value? Or do you think of it as temperature? And the only reason I ask is because I'm a temperature guy. So I'm curious on how your mind thinks.
Right. So I think if I understand your question correctly, no, I think about it in terms of value, right? So it could be warm, it could be cool, it could be grayed out, it could be strong chroma.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's all the same value, that's what I'm paying attention to.
That's interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's just a different way of thinking than I do. Like, I think of the temperature, whether it's grayed out or high chroma or whatever, but as long as it's in the same value, where really it's about color for you in the same value. It doesn't matter if it's grayed out or not. We just have a different terminology for our mind to accept it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think it is important. There's the painter Matt Smith, he and Skip are friends.
Yes. Amazing work.
Yeah, does amazing work. I mean, that guy has an amazing understanding of warm and cool.
Yes.
Right? He works pretty much with like a set palette all the time, paints in the desert a lot. And what the desert really teaches you too is that a lot of times we think, oh, shadow, cool, right? So everyone thinks cool, then they think blue, right? And so it's important that when you take a look at some of his shadow colors, particularly in a desert scene, right? Mm-hmm. Like he's got a warm and cool of each primary on his palette, and he'll use if it's a shadow, but a warm shadow, he'll just use the cool of the red, but it's still a red, right?
Yeah.
He's using his cooler, but so he's using like his alizarin or something, right?
Yeah.
And then he'll use his ultramarine instead of his cobalt, right?
Yeah.
If he needs a cooler blue, right?
Yes.
Like by having your warm and cool of each primary on your palette, that does help to simplify things in terms of what you're going to use for your shadows and what you're going to use for your head. That's the way he works.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's all relative to him, right?
Yeah, I'm not quite that methodical.
No.
He's pretty methodical.
Okay.
Which it gets him really good places.
How do you manage rejection? I don't mean rejection from others, because we don't really care about other people if they don't accept how we paint, but more from yourself. And I ask this because the last time we went out painting, I've never seen you not be happy with the result. And
Really?
I saw, I don't know why. But this time when we went out, I saw a little bit of frustration, and he said, yeah, this isn't going to make it. And it was the first time that says, well, wow, Maria's mortal. And I felt good about myself because I have tons of those, as you know. But how do you handle that rejection in that moment? It is fleeting though, but I mean, how do you handle that?
I think I try to take some of my own advice, which is to, if I do something that I don't like or I think isn't good, I'm more willing than I've been in the past to like let it be. And then perhaps later I might find something worthwhile about it. Right. So I think that that's kind of like how I try to like, I mean, I know I'm going to make crappy paintings.
Hmm.
Like it's gonna happen. Like to think that I'm Picasso, it's not like everything I touch is gonna be, gonna turn to gold.
Yeah.
So knowing that, and the more you paint, the better off you are, just because your whole success to loser rate, for lack of a better phrase, sorry, it shifts. And the more you paint, the more comfortable you are with your materials, the more comfortable you become with yourself.
Yeah.
That really is, I'm not a huge fan of the phrase journey, but that really is the journey of making friends with yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just me. Like there's other people out there who, yeah, they do love everything they make, right? Great, right? But I'd say that a lot of people that I've talked to, like when, I've had a lot of students that will be in the class and be like, oh, it's so bad. Don't even look at it. Right. And that's okay. I mean, I've been there. Like, I know exactly how they feel. Right. It's not something that is special to just only a few people and everyone else is like really good at it.
Yeah.
The most important thing is to like, I'm going to have down days and I'm going to down weeks or whatever. Right. Where it's just gonna be like, oh my gosh. Just one other little side note is that I also took a class with Ross Bleckner. One of his claims to fame was that he was like the youngest person to ever have a solo show at the Guggenheim.
Oh, okay.
Because he had a solo show when he was at the Guggenheim, like when he was like in his 30s or something. I don't know. It was back in the 80s.
Yep.
Yeah. Took a class with him. One of the most profound things that I took away from that class was him saying how after he has a show, he always thinks, or while he's making a show, this is it. I don't have anything else after this. And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you're Ross Bleckner. You think that, right? Yeah. And so hearing that and understand, that's why as you asked me about having friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such an important thing. Because like we begin to understand like, oh yeah, I'm gonna think these things and they're real, and I'm just gonna see how they feel, right? Like I'm gonna just try and work with it and not freak out. Yeah. But the most important thing is to just show up and paint.
Absolutely. Like, for sure.
Yeah. Like that's what gets you through it. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to paint again. I'm not going to bite off more than I can chew. Like, I'm not going to like decide like, well, I'm going in and making a big painting today. I'm going to go outside and do a 6-6,
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So what I get out of that, and I think one of your points was know that you're going to not succeed at some time or another. But you made one point there, and I think it's important. No matter what you paint, chances are there's going to be something in that terrible painting you did that is done really nicely. Whether it's an edge, whether it's a value shift, whether it's something like that. And then you could be, oh, wow, I did that. That's amazing. And then leave with that feeling instead of their overall feeling kind of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll probably leave the field going like, oh man, let me take that back to the studio and scrape that off, because I don't want to waste a really good substrate.
That's right.
I think I saw someone did ask about what.
Yeah, what your favorite substrate is.
Oh yeah, no, I oil primed linen.
Yeah.
So for painting outside, the Raymars Classens, either single prime or double prime Classens 13 or 15 oil prime. So if you're an oil painter, that's just the one I like. But definitely, I would definitely try out a whole bunch of different substrates, because some people don't like that texture, and then how does your brush meet the substrate, right? So it's lots of different attributes to how your materials are going to interact with one another.
You seem to have a very advanced understanding of grays. I'm not sure it can translate into language, but do you have some wisdom to pass on about neutrals?
Wisdom? Well, I don't have wisdom, but I don't know. Grays come really natural to me, I have to say. I think it's because I love color. I've always loved how subtle can I make something? Right? Like how subtle a shift. Grays really play into that because it's, as we've been talking about here with like warm and cool and that sort of thing, right? It'll seem like I've only added the tiniest bit of white, but wow, look how different it is when I put it down next to what I had. Oh, it cooled off a little, or, something like that. And so I think taking the time to fall in love with color, with just playing with color. So taking your colors and just work with 4 of them, right? And see how many different grays you can make with just that combination of 4 colors in white. And then see what happens when you like make all of those grays like the same value and just shift their color. I think if we look at paintings that we love and we really look at them intensely, we'll start to see all these little subtle things. And I think that that's what is making the painting alive and probably draws you in. So fall in love with color again.
Yeah, but when you talk about color, it's not necessarily the chroma that matters, especially when you're making grays because you have such subdued color. It's just the small shifts, it seems, that you're saying are important in the color.
Yeah, and what's nice though too is to take like that limited, if you limit yourself to just 4 basic colors or something.
Yeah.
Right. And then you just really start to see the possibilities with those and how it doesn't take much to shift it one way or the other.
Sounds like good wisdom to me. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending today's inspirational interview. If you want to check out what we're all about, go to artfulminds.ca. Thank you very much for letting me interview you, Maria.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. And thank you, everyone, for coming and asking great questions. I really appreciate being here.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Cheers.